Basic.
You're basic.
You are anything but basic. We're talking basic. Let's talk about no, wait. Okay, guys. I went live while we were chatting just now. So to everyone out there watching, welcome to Discussing Dostoevsky. We're going to be talking about The Idiot tonight. The book, not anyone in the stream.
Maybe a little bit of both. Well, I don't know.
So, guys, if you're on this channel, you know me. I'm Leslie with The Nerdy Narrative. I'm going to let all of my handsome co-hosts talk about who they are, where they're from. We're going to start down below with Crypto.
I'm from the CodeX Cantina. I'm the pretty one. The smart one is up there.
I don't know. I don't know what they're referring to, but my name is Una, and I do the editing for the Codex Cantina, and I just edit out all the bad things that I say. So, all right,
and make me look pretty.
There you go.
All right, Pei.
Yeah. So I had this bad echo, and I realized that I had the stream pulled up on another window. So I was just trying to figure that out.
I'm
I
guilty of
didn't
doing
catch
that.
much of the last minute, but yeah, I'm Pei from Attention. I think we're doing introductions, right? That wasn't from what I could tell. Okay, yeah, yeah. That's who I am.
And the four of us have come together to discuss The Idiot. Dun dun dun. Well, at least most of us have read The Idiot. I think we have a confession from Leslie that she's able to talk about 50% of The Idiot.
I made it over the 50% mark. I did give it until part 3, and then I threw in the towel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Did you read?
Oh, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, did you get finished? Did you read part 3 or part 3?
I read a few, 7 or 8 chapters of part 3, and I was like, okay, this is not changing enough from the experience I had from part 2 for me to continue. If Dostoevsky could ever write or could have ever written a novel start to finish the way he begins one, he would have a fan. I love his beginnings. Absolutely love his beginnings. But he just can't seem to talk about his themes, talk about society, talk about the culture, and keep that introduction to the characters in that same dynamic and compelling, engaging format. His characters in part 2 just turned into coal. Like Santa came at Christmas and he was like, we're going to take the pretty dolls out of the packages. We're going to throw coal in there.
Yeah.
And I just wasn't interested. And the dialogue
wasn't pulling you in. Now, with that said,
I tried the audiobook.
Do you know how it ends?
I hated the narrator. I tried a different one. Hated that narrator. I bought another audiobook because I was going through the free LibriVox, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
I bought another version. I was like, okay, I listened to this sample. This guy, I think he might be able to do it for me.
Couldn't get it to work.
It's the woman in part 2. Whoever it was doing most of the dialogue, she was so annoying with what she was saying, and the back and forth just went on and on and on and on.
Mrs. Ipanchin didn't work for you.
So do you know how it ends? Did you spoil it for yourself, or?
And I just kind of chased a rabbit.
So you don't know how it ends or anything?
Oh no, I can't hear any of you.
Uh-oh.
Hold on. Let me see if I can figure out what broke.
So while she's
y'all can keep talking while I figure this out, though.
So while she's figuring that out, the other 3 of us have finished it, and this will be a stream where we go through the book as a whole with spoilers. Everything's on the table for this discussion. Leslie didn't do her homework, and that's okay.
There we go.
That's okay. This is definitely one of those books that I've got limited experience with. This is my first time reading it, and I was really surprised because, you know, when people talk about Crime and Punishment or Brothers Karamazov, you know, his other 2 major books of the major Dostoevsky works, man, people just love that. Like there's a few quitters, right? You're always going to have a quitters in a big read along, but we had a lot more people that were divided on The Idiot. And I kind of started looking at reviews from other people online, and I found another reviewer that's just like, this book is trash. Like, it seems like this is definitely of like his major works. Like, I think, do we consider his 5 books the major works, the 6 books? I don't know. Maybe it's depending on the person you ask, you have a different number of how many true Black Sabbath albums there are. Maybe there's a different number of true big Dostoevsky works, but this definitely seems to be on the side where it's very divisive, which I think is kind of interesting when it comes to his major works. Overall, I was definitely positive, but if I'm like comparing it to his major works, which I still haven't read Demons, but the other ones, I'm kind of like, yeah, I guess for me, this is a lower end, but his low end for me is still like, wow, that was really cool what that book pulled off.
I think what part of the divisiveness is, in my opinion, a reader like me who reads to escape, to get into another world, to read for enjoyment. If you're a reader like that, I don't think, it's not that I think his work is trash. I just think it's not for me as the type of reader I am. Sure. I am looking for something that, I mean, I don't mind if I have to do a little bit of work into interpreting what's going on, but like when I read Dostoevsky, I get bored. I just, his dialogue is not, he doesn't write it in a way that keeps it interesting, and I just lose interest.
Sure.
I think that's fair. I mean, if you're reading for escapism and this book is heavy realism, 19th century Russia, that's opposite end of the spectrums. I mean, that's going to a vegan restaurant and trying to order a steak. No.
Yeah, I would say let's go to Pay next to get his kind of thoughts, because this is one of his favorite books, and it's definitely one of those books where, like, when it comes to like Dostoevsky's dialogue, to kind of like respond to what Leslie was saying there, I've never seen him so in tune with modern day Russia, like, well, at the time of writing it, right? The cultural movements at the time. Like, I saw so many things about how socialism and psychological egoism and nihilism and the old believers, like, there were so many things where I'm like, wow, Dostoevsky really got Russia at this point in time that for me, like, kind of like having read a lot of in that era, not a master of it, I was so interested in how he was kind of portraying the different elements when you pick out some of those things. I thought maybe we could go through some of those today. Pay, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, and with what Crypto was saying, if you're more used to reading for entertainment, it is very understandable where exactly where this novel is going to lose a lot of people. And even as you mentioned, it is one of my favorite, no, definitely my favorite Dostoevsky novel. But I had read it about 10 years ago, or even just maybe even over 10 years ago at this point. And so when I was rereading it this time, when I got to the second part, I was starting to wonder why I put this above some of his other works, because for me too, it was a bit even dry, but I typically like dry. So I thought I would be okay with it again, but no, I put it down for a bit after part 2, and when I picked it back up, I started to remember why, and especially with part 4, which I think is great. But on the characters, I think I actually saw Christy mention this, where she mentions how a lot of the dialogue is the way it's written is very intentional. It's like the characters almost put themselves in this kind of first person narrative. So we get the psychology behind the kind of developing the dialogue and their characters as they go. And if I remember correctly, Dostoevsky wrote this novel as he went. He didn't have really an outline or plan. And so every time he'd write it, it would just be whatever happens kind of happens. And so you kind of get that unraveling with the character's dialogue. He's kind of figuring it out as he himself writes it.
Yeah. I think go ahead, Crypto.
I was just saying, you mentioned there that when you read it this time, or last time 10 years ago, that you took a pause around part 2?
This time.
Okay. So I wonder if that's something for somebody that's looking to go into realism and have to pace themselves, and that's something that we can talk about, because I know Uno will want to bring that up about the pacing of the book. Do you feel that this pacing is something that spoke to you personally, of why you were able to enjoy it more than Crime and Punishment? Pei, sorry, directed towards you.
I'm not sure. When I'll read a novel like this, I'll typically have kind of books that deal around this subject around me, because I like to go back and forth, especially with history, and so much of Russian history is put in that. And I guess I just didn't really do that as much this time, and so just reading it without trying to delve more into it, I kind of got a bit more dragged along.
Okay.
I would guess. I don't know why I really kind of, or maybe it was just a second time reading, kind of already knowing how this unfolds. There's probably a few reasons why I kind of dropped off in the second part there for a bit.
For me, and that seems like a universal sentiment, is that somewhere in part 2 and 3, a lot of people experience this slowness, this crash of some sort.
Yeah.
And whether it was intended or not, whether it's a result of the format in which he was writing it as he was going, I can't say for sure. But I really enjoy, because it just made sense to me and I don't think this was intended by the author, but maybe it was, who knows. But the Elizabeth Dalton we talked about in our video today with crypto, she postulates that the author was intending to reflect his epilepsy in that moment. So I don't know what it's like to have epilepsy. I don't. And I'm interested in reading more about it. And I kind of looked up a little bit more about it. But, Dalton writes about how when it comes to epilepsy, there's like this buildup of this tension. And some people will have these tells that it's kind of coming along, and you can kind of see, and you can help them at that point in time. But then there's like this emotional climax that happens when a seizure occurs. And then there's the fall, and then there's the recovery. And it's almost like you feel like you're starting over sometimes, is the way that, she kind of describes it. And intended or not, I don't know, but I thought that was really interesting, because that was the biggest piece I was struggling with, is why are we starting over with like a new book in part 2? And then after part 2's big climax, then I'm like, well, are we starting a new book in 3? Like it felt kind of cyclical. It wasn't the usual ratcheting up and increasing of tension. And I thought that was poetic, I guess, to compare it to epilepsy, of this is what it's like to have these climaxes and then these collapses of energy. And this book mimics that. Does that work for a lot of readers? Probably not. But I thought it was a rather interesting way to interpret the novel's pacing.
I wouldn't have had any trouble with that, especially because part 2, time passed, and he tells you time passed when you. So that kind of made sense for that break and how that worked. But it was just not written with the same type of, like, part 1, I flew through. I couldn't put it down. I was so excited. I was like, oh, this is my book. This is where I'm finally going to fall in love with this author. And then part 2, he lost me.
Yeah. Part
and
2
he
seemed
couldn't
like
get me back with part 3. And even though people were saying he brought it back around in part 4, I wasn't willing to waste time and hundreds of pages of non-interesting to me stuff and dialogue to get there.
Yeah. 2 definitely seemed like the slowest, and it was not on the same level of intensity as the first one. But part 3 was really interesting to me, because part 3, that was the party scene with Hippolyte and the suicide letter, right?
Yeah.
What did you guys think? So let's just focus on, I mean, you can talk about this book for days, I feel like, because there's just so many different parts that I think in in a box, I think this book is very interesting. As a whole, it's harder for me to understand the pieces, but like in pieces, it makes more sense to me. Hey, talk to me a little bit about part 3 with that suicide letter and everything. What were your thoughts on that?
It was kind of funny. I thought that because you have he's so dramatic, and he talks about how he wants he points out a few specific people and who wants to read his manuscript, and then you have the others at the party they're kind of betting on whether he's actually going to go through with it, and then when it kind of comes around, one guy's like, "Oh no, I figured you were going to go do it anyway," but he doesn't really do anything to stop it. I thought that part was just hilarious, and then you find out he doesn't, and or tries to, but it fails in the most ridiculous way in which anyone would suspect it not to go through. But by the end of the book, I kind of you just want that character gone, because he's just constantly talking about how he's going to die anyway. And it's interesting how he why he commits suicide, or why he intended to anyway, as kind of, he mentions it as well, if he's going to die anyway, why can't this be just an act of his own will? And which is kind of strange, because no matter what he does, it's going to be an act of his own will. If he could choose to just live the last bit of his life, that would be an equal footing on making that his last decision equally to that of taking his own life. And he just kind of boils it down to, well, why don't I just go kill a bunch of people, and why do I do that? And it was just almost over the top kind of someone it's like, just as if he just wants people to know that he's incredibly nihilistic.
Well, he almost took over the narrative energy. I felt like it started in 2, where we have that talk from Miss Amponshin, where she starts to pity him, and we talk about pitying Antip, because
I wish he'd have taken her out with him,
because he has the stutter, I believe it was, and what was the other thing? We talked about it in our video, because it was viewed as like that, and then Prince Mishkin, his was the epilepsy, and there started that conversation of like, well, if these people aren't normal, we should pity them, right? The idea that they deserve more compassion is brought in, and then by the time when Hippolyte gets to this letter, there's like a complete lack of compassion from the other characters. Like they're like you said, they're betting on this man's life. Like, yeah, I thought you were going to take yourself out there. and there's just a complete lack of, I feel like, seeing him as a human being, seeing him for his differences as opposed to seeing who he is.
Well, they were probably just, I can't think of the word, but they were immune to compassion, because he had been going on and on and on and on. It
was like an hour-long speech.
I mean, it felt like. But I would rather listen to him than Mrs. Iponchin. Oh my gosh, that woman.
Well, I think for me, it came down to the idea that this hits at one of the crux of the story of religion and sin. And Pei, you had kind of talked about his willingness to commit suicide. And I think that is something of the sinfulness of the nature of these characters, and coming back to maybe the core of the story, besides the pacing and the epileptic issues of the story, of Mishkin being the Christ-like figure. And is he supposed to save everybody? Is he able to save everybody? Are you able to save somebody that doesn't want to be saved, that's already given up on life, because they themselves are struggling with this idea of living a life that feels imperfect from the outside standards of everybody else? And we see in Russia in this time that people are starting to look out and be like, oh, I could live life this way. What we're doing isn't so great.
You know what I thought was interesting, and I can't speak for nihilism. I'm not a nihilist, and I don't necessarily fully understand it. But I thought that was maybe one of the most interesting questions, and maybe that's just me being basic, is the idea of, well, if you really believe life is meaningless and there's no point, what would stop a nihilist who knows that they're going to pass away in 2 weeks from just going on a mass killing spree and just taking people out? Like, life is meaningless. Like, what would stop them from doing that? You can't punish the person. They're going to die in a couple weeks anyways.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was a rather interesting challenge that I guess I hadn't heard of before. Maybe it's common in certain circles, but I had never been postulated that question. And I guess for someone who really believed that life was meaningless, I guess what would keep them from doing that per se?
Man, I'd be too busy like eating all of my favorite foods, and I'd be like a book in my hand at all times. The last thing I'd want to do, no matter what my attitude was, I don't think if I had 2 weeks left to live, I'd be like, well, I'm going to go take out as many jokers as I can.
And we would hope that that's kind of the idea behind the story of
Mm-hmm.
pushing people towards more a positive than a negative, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at it as a point of, well, I don't do all those terrible things because I know that they're wrong, and I don't have to have religion to tell me that, is kind of that nihilistic view that I'm going to do just positive things. And that's a little bit more philosophy of it, right?
No, nihilists would not believe that it was wrong to do that per se. But I think I was going down the
So nihilism don't
path.
believe in right and wrong?
Nihilism doesn't. Go ahead, Pei.
So they don't believe in inherent right or wrong. There would be no. They would. Well, to use a Nietzsche quote, the origin of values is nihilism. If you remove where you find you get your values from, then you technically have none. They don't mean anything, and so at the end of the day, and you see this at the end of the novel, right? Both Mishkin and I can never pronounce his name. Both end up. It didn't matter which one was trying to do good or which one was doing what a lot of people would consider wrong. They both kind of end up in a kind of imprisonment. It's both have an equal footing. It just depends on what you're doing while you're doing it. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really mean anything.
But even as a nihilist, you're still influenced by your culture, right? And they are going to imprint values upon you. Or have you forsaken all of that?
Oh, yeah, but even if, but it doesn't change the fact that they don't mean anything. You can have these values. They're not values in the sense that they can't be overturned at any given moment. There's no outside legislator that says this is right or this is wrong. Going to Brothers Karamazov, without God is everything we do permissible. Well, in a nihilist point of view, it's not even so much that it's permissible. It's all neutral.
Well, it's even kind of comparable to Crime and Punishment. The idea of the master mentality versus slave mentality. And Nietzsche, I don't think, had written it at this point in time. I think this comes out a couple years after The Idiot. I don't remember if it comes out before Brothers Karamazov or not. But, with Crime and Punishment, obviously, definitely I think, the will to power. And the idea is that if you are the master mentality, you're creating those ideas of right and wrong. Like you're bending, I guess, and creating those values. And that's kind of the Napoleonic man argument, right? Like if you, from a history perspective, you hear the cliche line, the history's right, the history book, the winners write the history books, mm-hmm. right? That since they're in control of what's right and wrong, they can justify their actions. And the slave mentality is when you take on other people's morality and take on society's or religion's perspective. And what I was going to say to Leslie's point earlier is it really a matter of destroying a form of active nihilism at this point in time, or is it life affirmation? And I think Leslie kind of jumped over to that, which I thought was really good, with the idea that he was, why don't we go off and kill someone? Well, that's not life affirming, right? And I think that's kind of what a lot of these characters are trying to do is what is the purpose really?
Well, I guess if we think about that Napoleonic of what is the view is what would lead you to these deeds? Why would you make those choices? And in the book, we have those two parallel views of why you would and why you wouldn't. The Mishkin being the perfection of, well, you're supposed to help everybody.
Mm-hmm. From a master perspective,
the hero, yeah.
The idea is the universe is made up of wills, whether it's the will to love, the will to compassion, the will to power, and sometimes it's even self-mastery. I want to be so good at making YouTube videos, like no one can make better YouTube videos. Like, you want to improve and be the master of something in your life. I think is kind of one of the things that each of these characters is struggling of what is it that is giving me purpose in life per se. And what's most interesting about, to jump over to Nastasia, is she's the most destructive of all of these characters. She's like
she wore me out.
She's the Barasov of this novel, where she's trying to destroy every value, and she's almost self-destructive. And she comes from this place of, if I destroy everything, then that's proving that there is no value here almost.
She was so chaotic. I mean, in part 1, it was funny. Some of it, but
you didn't like her showing up in part 2, like, yoo-hoo, you don't have to worry about that money no more.
I mean, it's just, I could never quite figure her out. And of course, neither could Rogozhin. And I felt so sorry for him and Mishkin whenever she was involved. And I don't even know if she meant for what was happening to happen. I don't know if she was even in control of what she was doing. I just was constantly going, is there something wrong with her?
Well, you didn't get her backstory. You get a little bit of her backstory later.
When do you get the backstory? What part was that? I forget.
Part 4.
Yeah.
Part 4? Okay.
Yeah, part 4, you start learning. Well, it's the end of part 3, and then the beginning of part 4, you start learning all the tragic. I mean, she has a very tragic background, so you start to empathize a little bit with her.
Yeah.
She's still a terrible person, but you understand why she is so materialistic.
Gotcha. She still annoyed me.
Fair enough.
I want to say in part 2, Rogozhin mentioned he whooped the snot out of her a few times, and I'm like, you should have kept going.
So what did you guys think? There is, I don't know if you got to this part in part 3, but it for sure was in part 1. There's a couple of parts where there's going to be physical violence against a woman of some sorts, and then Mishkin comes in and takes the blow upon behalf of her. What did you guys think about that?
Well, I mean, in the first one, I respected what he did, because dude was about to pop his sister, and he had no business, in my opinion, for that blow against her. So, and I think Mishkin made him feel like a heel about it, as rightfully he should have. And I think he just instinctively did what he thought was right for someone who she didn't deserve what her brother was about to do.
Leslie, Team Will Smith.
No, I think Will Smith
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
definitely in the wrong.
It's maybe a little comparable to, I guess, what did you guys view as Mishkin's point in this novel? What did you think he was, I'm going to say meant to represent, but maybe, I mean, what does he represent to you? Like, how did you interpret his actions in this novel?
I thought he was a very selfless person. I thought he was just honestly trying to live a good life.
I've seen the term dead Christ, the idea that pure goodness is dead, that can't exist in our world. I've seen that term, and I kind of agree with that. I wax and wane, and we've talked about this. Of sometimes I agree with it, and other times I don't. I kind of go back, and I'm very wishy-washy on our hero non-hero journey. He has so very little growth, I feel like, comparative to the other characters.
Well,
Where
I think he had
you
all of his growth before. Like when we met him,
yeah,
he had already
was done.
been through it. Yeah.
Yeah, his character arc was already came to us fully fledged, and we just see him going through the paces, and that's not what I
But
want.
it was unexpected, though.
Yeah,
He did a lot of things that were not predictable or unexpected. Even as we were getting to know him and how good he was and his values and what he was willing to step up and do, even knowing that, I was expecting him to change over time. I was expecting these people around him were going to
corrupt him. Yeah.
And throughout the parts that I read, he never did. And so I enjoyed that. I liked that he never changed. The people around him, crazy as loons. They were just doing all kinds of things, trying to hurt each other, him, and he never wavered. And that is some kind of strength.
But why?
I
guess that's the thing is why didn't he? We don't know any of his backstory of that other than that he was really locked away for all these years and comes out this perfect kind of goody two-shoes guy and is incorruptible. Why is he that way? I want background on him.
Because he thought he was near death. He thought he was going to die. He thought he was ill. And I think that he just, if I thought I was going to die, if I had a year left to live, man, I'd be so sweet to everybody. I think I would be just the sweetest person.
No violence.
I would be volunteering.
You're not going to go on a mass murder spree? That's good.
I think I would be a really sweet person. And then after a year, after I had just had this amazing servant's heart and was just doing all these things, after a year, it's a mistake. You're going to live. Nothing's wrong with you. 66 days is what forms a habit. Well, here I've been living like this for 365. All of a sudden, now I'm not going to die. I get to live. I think I would continue now I'm going to give back because I'm going to live. So
there's an 80s movie with this plot. I can't remember what it's called. He gets the wrong brain scan for his tumor in his head, and he thinks he only has 6 months to live. And I can't remember the name of that movie, but yeah, I guess that comes back to our idea of what we talk about of, do you make those positive choices or those negative choices? And we see that comparison in this book. Mm-hmm. See, you're more Michigan. That's good. We need more people like you in the world today.
On my good days.
What about you, Pei? What did you think of Michigan?
Well, I think he's I agree with the why he's like that with what Leslie said, and I think the best I know he's is often described as that Christ-like figure, but I think that can only be accepted alongside Rogozhin. Mm-hmm. And I think that point is made when the painting comes out. You see, Michigan doesn't quite understand why Rogozhin appreciates that painting, and a lot of people say well, Rogozhin's the kind of the opposite of Michigan. But I'd say that they both represent certain aspects in the way Russia was seeing Christianity or that Christ-like figure at that time. Michigan embodies the more kind of like the traditional Christ-like figure, whereas as Rogozhin was kind of seeing him was representing the kind of the way the more mortal kind of dead Christ, the one that would once again bring up Nietzsche, the God is dead kind of it and with that, and so there's those two views that are kind of seem opposing, but you can't really have one without the other, and so It's not so much that he's a complete embodiment of the Christ-like character, but just a very small aspect of what is taken.
Yeah. I read in I think it was in Our Time, the Joseph Frank biography, they talked, there's like a very famous line where he talks about how Dostoevsky himself feels like he failed with this novel. He likes the idea of Mishkin, and he talked about, I don't want to put words into the mouth, and even then they'd be translated anyways, being English as opposed to Russian, but there was something along the lines of creating this, not a Christ-like figure, but the ideals of Christianity in a man, and putting him into the world, what would happen. And Crypto and I talk a lot about that in some videos that we recorded, but it's interesting the way that you can put this person that is really good. Like if you look at it from a Christian value of what's good, he's quick to forgive, he's loving, he's giving, and he's just crapped on through the whole novel. And I think that's hard to particularly if you associate with him, he's kind of like the Alyosha kind of character where you're like, you don't want to see good people punished, right? Like that's why tragedies work, is evil is in it. And you want that evil to be expelled, to be go through a catharsis. You want to have catharsis at the end, right? You want bad to be punished and good to somehow triumph. And that's the bizarro world twist of The Idiot, is we have goodness, pure goodness almost, is punished. And it's almost like evil takes over, right? Like at the end, Rogozhin, I mean, he kind of has his okay, I did something wrong morally, my conscience is bugging me, goes to jail, right? We have the Aglaya marries in Dostoevsky's eyes, the Catholic, which was just, whoa, terrible. Oh my goodness, you married a Catholic. and then Mishkin goes back to the insane asylum, literally driven insane by society, telling him his goodness is wrong and abused. That is just crazy to me. That's not any way how most people would structure a novel.
But it's not crazy in real life. I mean, that's how it is, right?
Yeah.
We always pick on the
fictional
good
standpoint. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, fiction a lot of times mimics real life. Of anytime there's that good person or the person's number one or on top, we love to see our heroes fall. We love to see them be torn down so that they can be built back up. And unfortunately, there's not the Idiot Part 2 where Rogozhin comes back, bigger, badder, better than ever. Oh.
Y'all would be on your own for that one.
We're on our own for this one. Come on.
Only for the last 300 or so pages.
Hey, at least she showed up for the live stream.
I think going off of Uda's point, the novel does bring up a good question, and that is what is the value of having someone like Mishkin, his goodness? What's the point in having something like that? Because the results of everything he does isn't positive. It doesn't
change
really
anything,
solve
right?
anything, nothing. And so what is the value in being that way if it does not guarantee that what this goodness that we claim he has doesn't produce something that then one could turn around and say is good in itself?
Does it need to, though? I mean, is being good or righteous on your own worthy enough?
Well, that's the question I think he would be trying to ask.
Is that our humanity? Is that what defines us as a peoples?
I just feel like if I was reading this and I was Russian at the time, I'd be like, man, Dostoevsky hates all of us. Is this really how he thinks we are? Gosh, he thinks we're terrible people.
Yeah, well, he definitely over dramatized his folks a lot. But something I noticed is me alongside all of the other characters noticed, they all thought Mishkin was an idiot, but then they all realized it's not that he is an idiot. He was just a good person. And Heart of Gold, and everybody noticed it, but none of them were really influenced to try and be like him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Not in the parts that I read, anyway.
Well, and he wasn't corrupted either. Interesting. If he, I don't think he's as good as Alyosha, but he is almost pure goodness, and he still could not be corrupted. And in the same way, the evil couldn't be cleansed, right? Like it was this eternal struggle almost. And if you depending on your translation, it depends on how they translated it. Throughout the whole text, though, there are specific lines that are straight out of the Book of Revelation. If we're taking this book holistically as this view of the battle between good and evil, this eternal struggle until the day of reckoning happens, that's kind of what this book is. But like, I don't feel like there was any redemption at the end either. It's like it just goes on of like, this is an eternal struggle that we have. We only got one good guy. It's kind of sad.
Poor thing. He just couldn't influence them enough to be good people.
Yeah.
And he
Or
wasn't interesting enough to keep me reading, so.
It's okay. He's not for everyone. It's not for everyone. Now with that said, interestingly enough, that painting, I thought was interesting. I had a specific take on that, because did you know that like Dostoevsky actually did see that painting in real life with his wife?
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and he told.
I did. Sorry, I did look it up. But I didn't know that. And I've got I haven't read it cover to cover. I've been select because I just got it recently, but I've got his the Joseph Frank biography, and he told his wife Anna, he said, a man could lose his religion looking at a painting like that. What are your thoughts on that? Yeah, Rogo, he says something very much like that when talking to Michigan about it, and you don't get as much of the psychology of him in throughout the novel, not as much as you do. You get a lot of descriptions of him being a dark, mysterious character, but I think with that one line, you almost get all the psychology, the way he thinks and what he's doing with that. He's kind of he's admitting, well, this is what happened. When he's looking at the painting, he's looking at not just the painting, and he's not saying that directly to the painting, but it's representing his the way he was seeing Russia in general. It's changed from its traditional kind of orthodoxy to what it was becoming. It was one can lose their faith in looking at the way Russia is going in the way it is right now. It's this dead thing that didn't die for anything, and there's no beauty in it whatsoever, and therefore that's going to cause one to lose their religion.
And it's interesting too, because do you remember Rogozhin? This is a very specific part. There's a part right here where Rogozhin says, "Do you believe in God?" to Prince Mishkin, I believe it was, and Mishkin replies, not with like, it's almost kind of an active form of a response, but he almost gives like these like four parables of like what's worse, like almost like well, there's this person that doesn't believe at all, and there's this person who forgave. And it's kind of the I don't want to do spoilers for any of his other books, but there's some books where he talks about actions speak louder than words. And one of the things that I kind of took from this too is faith doesn't have to necessarily be logical, explainable, that there's actions and there's faith that you have to just kind of take this leap of to believe to be real, right? And that's why we call it faith. It's not a fact, a form of science. It's a form of believing something. And I thought that Dostoevsky does some of his best work here, where he talks about faith being this idea. I think he's challenging Russia, to your point, of actively believing as opposed to logically trying to understand it, because you'll notice all the other characters in this book are going through this nihilistic, what's the point of life? And he's like, look, guys, you just have to love. You just have to be compassionate. You have to just believe. And he thought that was the salvation, I think, for Russia specifically.
Yeah, I agree with that. Very, very Kierkegaardian in the sense that it's not supposed to be rational and trying to make sense. It's because that something like that eliminates the complete notion of faith altogether. You're supposed to just be that way. So yeah, no, I completely agree with that.
Oh, Kierkegaard. You got to bring him up in this stream.
I was trying not to, but as you were saying that, I was like, well, that's
You're going to give me that angst.
Kierkegaard. Sorry.
I don't know. I think
he's promised to torture me with that one day.
Yeah,
he keeps saying.
I was telling Crypto, I read a lot of Kierkegaard, and it just gave me all this angst, this feeling where I couldn't.
We need the feelings pillow.
I couldn't. Oh, it's upstairs.
Feelings wheel.
I just couldn't operate when I was reading him because I'd have all this existential dread of like the purpose of life, like these characters are having in this book. And
he wants to pass that on to me.
And well, okay, I've never once met you. You're never gonna read Kierkegaard. I never said that for Kierkegaard for you. But when I was editing some of these videos and I'm thinking about like Nietzsche and Kierkegaard, like I started to have those feelings again, like this sense of dread. I don't know what it is, but there's something to be said about trying to logically parse through this that causes me to just start to like freak out a little bit. Like it's hard.
Freak out.
Yeah, and I think that that's what you're expressing is exactly why so many people put Dostoevsky up there with one of the with the existentialists, writing these ideas out before a lot of the major existentialists began to write, and why so many of them take Dostoevsky so seriously is exactly because they would agree with what you just said.
And I'm not like a hard determinist, obviously, but I honestly feel if it weren't for Dostoevsky, Nietzsche would not have been Nietzsche. Like his writings are literally like they feel like direct responses to Dostoevsky novels.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's hard to imagine Nietzsche not reading Dostoevsky.
No. In terms of other things in this book, is there anything else anybody wanted to bring up?
I got a copy for sale.
Oh.
She's not a fan.
Yeah, I'm done with him. I'm breaking up with him. We're over officially.
That's okay.
Officially.
That's okay.
Yeah. He's definitely not one I'd be like, if people come to me and they're like, okay, I want to try reading a classic. I read science fiction and fantasy. I want to try a classic. What do you recommend? I would never in a million years send them in the direction of Dostoevsky. I probably wouldn't send them towards Russian lit to begin with. I'd probably start them somewhere, some little American classics or maybe even a French classic, and then say, okay, if you like this, we can build up to it.
Well, it might be worth taking who's asking into consideration, right? Like
well,
if
absolutely.
If there's someone that's like, hey, I really like reading, philosophical works or things that have like a bigger meaning, like maybe those would be the people.
My example was science fiction and fantasy.
Okay.
Well, yeah. Well, duh.
It's comparable to
the sky is blue.
It's comparable to Crypto here. I cannot get him to read a Brandon Sanderson book. He says like, I'm done with that guy. I'm not
he doesn't like it.
He's bad to him, and he's done.
Well, he's done with Stormlight. He doesn't like Stormlight.
Will you read any Brandon Sanderson ever again, Crypto?
Me and Brian just don't have a thing.
You lie. You told me when he was coming out with those 4 secret novels, if it was something different, you'd give it a shot.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. If he does something, but I read a thing today that this is way off topic, that they're all set. Like each one is from one of his different things. Like one is set in the Mistborn, one is set in the blah blah blah, one's set in the boringness, one's set in the sprite thing or whatever it is. I don't know. So like, no, I won't read any of those.
Yeah.
That's fine.
I'm with you on that one.
Yeah.
All right. So by the end, was Prince Mishkin an idiot?
Yes.
I think it just defines on what is an idiot.
Yeah, I think it comes to there's that part of the book where he's sitting on the bench and he sees the bird whistling, and he notices how that bird's in connection with all the other things that are whistling around, and he kind of dawns on him at that moment that he doesn't have that. It's not so much he's an idiot in general. He just is within the context of what he's been placed in. He's not understood, therefore he's the idiot. He's speaking to them on a more metaphysical level instead of the superficial, which is what the rest of them are doing. And so he's kind of outside the connection of that. And
I mean, it comes down to also, right, that the time period that this is written, an idiot has a different kind of meaning definition in the grand scheme of things, especially probably 19th century Russia, than what we would consider an idiot in 2022. I mean, what, you can't work a computer? What are you, an idiot? Like,
yeah.
What do you mean you don't know how to use a touch screen? You're an idiot? I think that again, that definition is going to be key of what we're looking at him as.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good thing to mention.
All right, my last thing is I don't think he's the idiot, because I think one of the things you have to take in consideration is the internal assignment versus external assignment, and whether you're choosing to judge yourself by society standards. And Michigan's one that is clearly choosing to be 100% intrinsically rating on what his values are and what he thinks is good. And to me, I don't think I would classify that as an idiot by today's standards per se.
Well, I didn't see him at the end. I didn't see him at the end, so I don't know. He lost me. Actually, Mrs. Iponchin is the one that successfully ran me off.
You don't like her, do you? It's sad.
I did not like her, and the first two narrators were so annoying when they did her voice that just exacerbated the problem.
In the audiobook there.
Yeah, see, I read the first part one, I read in just a few days. When I got to part two and it was just slogging for me, I thought, okay, it's time to call in the big guns. Let me get a dynamic audiobook narrator. I tried one, it was bad. I tried another one, it was bad. And then I bought another one, and also bad. And then I was like, all right, let me go back to the book, and I'm just going to read 6 pages a day. And I just
couldn't do it.
And I couldn't do it. I was like, all right, well, I'm going to like put it down for a week. And that turned into 2.
And
that turned into forever.
Now it's for sale.
It's if I'm in Florida again and that book still hasn't been unhauled, I will take it off your hands gladly. I do not have
it's in the pile by the door to go.
I'm darn it. Can I go there sooner?
Yes.
All right.
Well, wait till this summer when Universal's new stuff opens.
Yeah. The hot summer. Well, all right. Any final words on this book before we sign off?
Dumb Dostoevsky.
I got nothing.
No, I think I've said what I was.
Well, I believe the Codex Cantina will have some more videos coming up on their channel discussing the idiot. They have a before you read that went up today. That was interesting. Like, I will listen to them talk about it, and I'm going to count that as my, all right, I have gotten my baptism by the idiot and Fyodor Dostoevsky. I'm good. So keep an eye on their channel. I will have all the channels of the co-hosts linked down in the description box below. Once it goes up live, that should populate for you. And keep an eye on their channel for more if you want to hear more about. Do y'all do it by parts?
Yeah, we've got part 1 next Thursday, then part 2,
Perfect.
And then the Thursday after that will be part 3 and 4 together.
There you go, guys. You got trouble sleeping? Put on one. I'm just kidding. I guarantee you I'm going to love your discussion on it, but not enough to go back and read it for myself.
Okay, I'm gonna take that book off your hands. I'm gonna take it.
I'll send it to you. It's yours. All right,
Thank you for
everyone.
hosting, Leslie. Thank you.
No
Yeah, thank you.
problem. Thank you all for joining us tonight, and keep an eye out for the latest. I know there is a War and Peace read along going on the Literary Discord server. I'll get that in the description box down below if you want to jump in on that huge tome. And keep an eye on the Discord. You never know what's going to be coming up in the future months for us to read along together. We'll see what classic gets picked next and if Leslie can stick with it. We'll find out later. Y'all have a great night, and we'll see you guys soon.